Perfect. All right, so I'm gonna kick it off. I'm gonna introduce Colin and then I'll let Colin take it away. I'm very, very excited to have Colin Levi here speaking with us today. He's a leading voice, he's a lawyer, he's a technologist, he's a general counsel and director of legal at Malbec. It's a top enterprise CLM platform. Colin is an educator, writer, advocate. He's the author of The Legal Tech Ecosystem, co-author of CLM for Dummies. He's editor of the Handbook of Legal Tech. He's also a columnist for today's General Counsel. He's a judge for American legal technology. So Colin is a really, really great thought leader in this area of legal and technology. And there's nobody better than him to talk about AI and what it looks like for the legal landscape. So welcome, Colin. Super excited to have you here. And I'll let you take it away. This is your show. And by the way, we're gonna have the chat open and the Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to put them on the chat or on the Q&A, and we'll do the best of our ability to answer them all.
Sounds great. Well, thanks very much for that very kind introduction. Great to be with you all. Just one little practical note. If you happen to see a furry creature across the screen or hear something in the background, I have one of my cats asleep on the desk, and rather than disturb her, I'm just letting her continue to sleep. So just be aware of that as we get going here. Like with cats, you kind of let them do what they want to do, and all for the most part as well. So thank you everyone for being here. So I'm going to talk about, although it's this guide that I put together, and I'll actually explain how I put it together too, because it's actually pertinent to this talk, is entitled AI for Law Firms. A lot of what I talk about here is, what I will be talking about rather, is going to be widely applicable for legal departments, law firms, what have you. It's really just a matter of kind of getting to understand AI, its current state, what's capable with using AI right now, and what remains to be seen. So keep in mind that this is kind of really just a roadmap that I'm going to be offering for what exists currently, but understanding that we're only at the very beginning of this journey and we have a long ways to go. I kind of equate it to where we were when the internet first came out. It was kind of exciting and disruptive, but there was a mix of reactions because it wasn't necessarily everything that everyone thought it was going to be. And now it is, for the most part, what people thought it was going to be, but it took a while to get there. And so that's the same case for AI. We're really at the very start here. In terms of current uses of AI, and when I refer to AI, by the way, AI has itself existed for quite some time, but AI, as most people refer to it now, is generative AI, meaning that it generates something for you based off of an input. And that usually is content, whether it's text, whether it's analysis, whether it's an image, a video, some combination of all those things. And that's where we get the generative part of generative AI from, is it's AI that is generating stuff for you. Whereas in the past, AI really was just doing data analysis, but wasn't actually generating anything per se new, really. But now we're talking about content creation that's being generated by AI, which, as I'll get into, has some interesting impacts upon different areas of work. In terms of AI is currently being used, a lot of it is being used for a variety of things that pertain to documents, whether it is researching and drafting documents or researching cases or laws for use in documents. And the way it does that is through a couple of different means. One is and by it I mean a specific tool, is you provide it with a query or an input, find me cases that pertain to this or that, and what they have to say about this particular area of the law, or this particular legal principle, or this particular legal argument that I'm trying to make, and find things that can support that, refute it, or that are somewhere in between, and give me, analysis of the strength of those types of arguments. Those types of things are what AI can do right now. And it does that through a couple of things, through reviewing data, extracting data, organizing information, and doing it sort of on a large scale that ordinarily would take humans to do over a long period of time, and now can do pretty quickly, which means that you can be, I'm going to use the E word, and I realize we're talking about law firms as well as legal departments, and I apologize not really for using this word, but it makes things more efficient. I know. Time, billing, I get it. But it allows you to do more, be more productive, and quite frankly, better help your clients more easily and more productively. And so that really is quite a benefit, not just for you, the lawyer, but also for your client, because you're better able to provide your client with better results, better documents, better legal arguments based off of the analysis you're getting from generative AI. And that's really great in that AI is now able to do all of that. And as I've talked about, I'm just going to go into some other use cases. But before I do that, let me just talk about the fact that not all AI tools are the same. There are a variety of different tools that are capable of doing different things. And so it's really important to understand that one AI tool is not the same as another one. And so it's not going to give you the same result. It's not going to work the same way. And I'll get into that a little bit later in this presentation, but I did want to set that out early in the presentation. Other use cases for AI currently include things like contract analysis, which is kind of more in my realm as a transactional lawyer. A lot of what I do is reviewing contracts, drafting them, and negotiating them. Although it's really not just me doing it, it's actually AI helping me do that. And it's helping me do that through a variety of different ways, which includes reviewing key clauses, verifying whether they actually are aligned to our risk profile, whether they need some tweaking to better align with what we want to propose back, identifying language that is outside of the language that we're comfortable with, and perhaps proposing alternative language, flagging potential risks in contracts, whether it's through clauses or through other terms that are in the contract. So that type of thing is very helpful for me because being someone who is leading a legal department, but also the legal department is really me and me alone, I need help. And I can do it all myself, but it takes time. But now I'm able to be more productive with my time and spend my time on more sort of strategic things, whether it be revising our contractual documents, revising templates, working on other corporate actions or corporate activities, or what have you, and not just reviewing contracts day in, day out, because that used to be what I had been doing. But now, thanks to AI, I don't have to do that because AI is able to allow me to review these contracts faster. And not just allows me to be more productive, but it also allows me to push forward transactions on a quicker timeline, which helps, especially when you are operating in an environment that is very quarterly driven. And oftentimes the end of the quarter tends to be ahead time of year. Legal research, as I mentioned earlier, is a very powerful use case for AI. You have tools like Vincent from VLEX. You have Lexis AI that allow you to research cases, allow you to draw out the principles and the key findings of those cases, figure out which cases are most applicable to perhaps whatever case you're dealing with, which ones perhaps are not going to be as strong, but you want to be aware of. And then on top of that, can actually help you put together briefs that incorporate those findings quickly using a tool like, for example, ClearBrief, which basically performs a variety of tasks, including a little bit of legal research with drafting a brief. Two tasks that normally would be very time consuming, repetitive, and really would take a lot of effort, but now are more easily done, faster done, and better done thanks to AI. In addition, this is something I don't think gets talked about enough by folks in the legal tech space, but AI can also help with just intake of clients, that which can be also a time-consuming task, because what happens is you have a lot of matters you're working on. You have a new client. You got to set them up in your file system. You have to get the information you need from them. Have to have them perhaps sign some forms, get various bits of administrative info from them. Well, now you can have a chatbot do that using AI rather than you having to kind of take all this information down and then input it into your system, make sure it's accurate and all of that. You can have a chatbot do all of that for you so you don't have to do it yourself, which is quite helpful. In addition, as I mentioned before, but I'll now talk about it a little more specifically, AI is able to help with predictive analytics as well, which basically refers to using data to help inform the potential winningness of your argument or of your case based off of prior cases that have been argued, not just in general, but perhaps even before the specific judge you're going before, which is really powerful because it's allowing you to better formulate your strategy, better determine whether it's actually worth litigating or not. And if it is worth litigating, what the likelihood of success is and what the factors that are going to help you and going to hurt you are. And that is very helpful because it's relying on data rather than just your own intuition and your own experience, which is helpful, yes. But I think in today's day and age, clients really want data-driven analysis and strategies. They want to know why you're suggesting a specific course of action, and AI is able to help you with that. Whereas before, you kind of just relied on the word of the lawyer, which is all well and good, but if you have data to help supplement the word of your lawyer you're working with, all the better. So now I want to talk about a little bit about the fact that AI is not this panacea that's going to solve all of your problems and that is just going to really kind of just resolve any issues you have. Because as we've seen time and time again, there have been cases where lawyers have relied on AI to their detriment because the AI tools have made up cases, made up lawyers, made up some combination of the two. And really that is what that is the result of is, and this may be a bit of a controversial statement, but it's a result of not the AI sort of misbehaving per se or not doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's more a matter of the user not understanding that the AI tool they're using is not the best tool to be using for what they're trying to do. For example, ChatGPT, we all use it. I will mention soon why you probably shouldn't be using it currently for legal work, but there are a variety of other reasons that I'll mention as well. But there's one very pressing reason that I think you shouldn't be using it currently. But these lawyers use ChatGPT to help draft briefs. And you would think, oh, well, it's AI. It's been trained on all the data that's available, so surely it can help me with that. Well, that's not necessarily true for a couple of reasons. One is ChatGPT has not been trained specifically on case law. It's been trained on the data of the internet. And as we all know, what's available online is anything and everything. So if you're looking for something to, prove to yourself that something is true, you're likely going to find that online, even if it is not actually true or not. And so what ended up happening was these lawyers used ChatGPT to draft a brief. They didn't double check the cases. They thought that it was just accurate because it was AI. And then they got chastised by the court or sanctioned by the court for using briefs filled with fake cases. And that has happened a number of different times. And that is purely really the result of user error more than AI not working as it should. The AI did what you asked it to do. Problem is, it's not trained to do what you are wanting it to do, meaning it hasn't been exclusively trained on case law, like, for example, VLEX has been. It's been trained on the internet. The internet has some good information and has plenty of bad information. So that's the problem. In addition, and you currently probably should not be using ChatGPT because there's a current lawsuit against OpenAI, and the judge in that lawsuit, I forget the name of the case specifically, told OpenAI to save all data that has been inputted into ChatGPT for purposes of this litigation. We don't know exactly how that data is likely going to be used, but that just is something to be aware of because OpenAI has to obey that court order. And as a result, any information you input into it currently until another court order comes down is going to be saved. Whether that data is actually shared with the court is unknown currently, but the fact that it's being saved at all is, I think, something to be of concern. And in addition to the fact that, as I mentioned before, ChatGPT has been trained on the internet. And if something's been trained on the internet, You get what you pay for in some ways. Um, Claude is not subject to any litigation along the lines of what OpenAI is subject to, but also I would not suggest using it necessarily for legal work because it also has been trained on the law of the internet. Although, in my experience, it generally is better at writing and at specific and at editing than chat. So if you want to edit, say, like a generic piece of writing that doesn't have that's not confidential, Claude could very well be useful. But you really want to verify and understand the different tools that exist and know that just because ChatGPT and Claude exist, they're not the only tools that exist out there in the AI world. And just because they're free or available for a nominal fee doesn't mean that means that they're likely going to be the best tools to use. All that being said, though, because we live currently in a world where technology is everywhere, there is a degree of competency that is now expected of lawyers, meaning that not just competent in the law, but competent in technology. For example, the majority of states in the US now have a uh, ethical rule of tech competency, meaning you have to understand the benefits and risks of relevant technology that are pertinent to your practice. And that really means you need to understand technology, you need to understand different tools that can be helpful for you, why they could be helpful, and if they could be helpful, use them in an appropriate ethical manner. In addition, as we've seen from the EU, and perhaps sometime we'll see from the US, there are various regulations on AI. There's the AI Act that recently came out. There's the Data Act that recently came out. And before that, there's GDPR, which has to do with privacy, as well as the California Consumer Privacy Act, all of which kind of interplay with each other with respect to use of data and use of AI with data. And in addition, we also have the overarching just duty of client confidentiality, meaning we owe a duty to our clients to maintain confidentiality. And so we need to use tools that will adhere to that rule of confidentiality and will not violate it, which speaks to something I said earlier about ChatGPT and their lawsuit. But so, and this is, I think, another point that cannot be emphasized enough is oversight. Look, AI is not perfect. Humans are not perfect. Therefore, we can't expect humans that create AI tools to be perfect because we ourselves are imperfect. And as a result, we need to double check our work. It goes back to what we all were told in high school, to double check our work, meaning that trust but verify. And yes, I understand that this in turn means that, well, I thought since we're using AI, I can just trust anything that comes out of AI. That's not necessarily the case. Yes, to some degree, AI is going to give you information that is helpful, but especially when it comes to cases you're relying on and are going to put forward before a court, you really want to understand whether those cases are real or not. And so I cannot emphasize enough the importance of using tools that are trained on actual case law and not using tools to find cases that are just trained on the internet, because the internet is full of real information and fake information, which is, not great, but it is what it is. So that I think is super important. So this little chart that I have put together here kind of shows you how all this forms one bigger, larger framework that you have to keep in mind when using AI. AI is something here that remains very helpful. It's going to be very productive now and in the future, but it is not going to be something that is going to solve all of your problems. And human judgment and collaborating with AI is the best way forward. It is not something to be viewed as something that is an outright replacement of you or of all the jobs that you do. So let's talk for a little bit about evaluating and adopting AI tools. So I will say this, that there is the syndrome that unfortunately afflicts lawyers and legal professionals all too often and affects people in other industries as well. And what I will call it is shiny tech syndrome. Other people call it shiny key syndrome or what have you. And really what I'm referring to is the fact that there are these technologies out there and they're all, very excited about them. You see a lot of noise about them. You see a lot of information being put out there about them. And you think to yourself, gee, I really want to be a part of this. I want to have this tool. I want to experience the joy I see on TV from these people using these tools. I want to be, my friend who's having a great time using AI and being super successful with it. Here's the problem. Context matters. And so just because your friend is using a tool that works for them doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for you. Their circumstances are not the same circumstances that you exist in, that you have. And so really what I mean by that is something I like to say is people, process, then tech. Meaning start with your people, understand, conduct a needs assessment, identify specific bottlenecks and pain points. I understand why those process pain points exist. Do they exist because people aren't following the process properly, or people found a better way to do something that isn't the process as currently documented, or people just don't feel comfortable using something? Um, Interesting. I just saw a comment that apparently people can't see the slides. Hopefully now you can see the slides.
Not yet. I see you.
Well, it
Okay.
looks like we now can see them. Okay.
Perfect.
Well, apologies for that. And don't worry, these slides will be available after the presentation. So you'll get it, you'll get a copy of them. And I also have a little action plan as well that I put together that you'll be able to use as well. So don't worry, you're not missing anything. You're just hearing the wonderful sound of my voice. And now you can see the slide. So we're good to go. Apparently, some can see them the entire time. Gotta love tech. Works sometimes, doesn't work all the time for everyone. I sometimes joke around that technology sometimes acts in human-like ways, and that sometimes if you are nice to the technology, it acts better or perceived to act better. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. All I know that is that some people seem to just magically make tech work for them, and other people have struggles, and I'm not really sure whether that's a function of a gremlin living in the computer or whether it's just the user. Who knows? Not going to make a judgment there. Anyway, going back to what I was saying. Yes, Margaret, exactly. You really want to understand what your needs are before you even start looking for tools, because you don't want to have a solution in search of a problem, which I see all the time. You really do not want that. What you want to do is you want to, again, as I mentioned, start with your people, see how they operate, within the processes that you have already in place. And based off of those processes that you have in place and your people and their adherence or not or lack of adherence to the processes that you have in place, then evaluate potential tools. And when I say evaluate potential tools, what I mean is start off with figuring out figuring out what your needs are, documenting your needs, and then evaluate tools based off of those needs, but ensuring that the evaluation process doesn't just incorporate the key stakeholder, i.e. the person holding the purse, so to speak. You want to also incorporate those who will be using the tool most often as part of the evaluation process, because the bottom line is, yeah, you may be the one that's going to actually be dispersing the funds to buy this tool, but the people that are going to be using the tool are really the people that should be evaluating it, because they're the ones that matter. They're the ones that are going to be wanting to use the tool or not use the tool based off of their experience. So you need to bring them in early and often with respect to those product demos. And then in addition, you want to make sure that you can verify whatever the vendor is claiming about their tool. This can be done through a proof of concept or a sandbox type situation where you have a sort of a controlled brief period of time in which you use the tool. My company engages in these all the time. Or you can test it out some other way, perhaps using some of your own documents or what have you. And then once you've got kind of your tool and you figured out what it is you want to have, make sure that the implementation rollout is planned and is structured in a way so that you don't do everything at the same time. Meaning that you start off with, say, a pilot of the tool. Pilot ends up being successful. Then you roll it out to one department. Then you roll it out to another department and what have you. Part of that also depends on the size of your organization. You could have a larger organization or a smaller organization. That's going to in part dictate both the type of tool you have, how you implement it, who uses it, and also the price points you're looking at as well, because some of these tools have higher price points depending on what your needs are and what functionality they offer. And then lastly, this is perhaps the most important piece of all, aside from assessing your needs at the outset, is having metrics in place to establish and measure the success of this AI tool, whether it is a tool to augment the review of documents, whether it's a tool to help assist with brief review and drafting, whether it has to deal with legal research, what have you. You want to be able to measure the effectiveness of the tool so that you then can determine whether it actually is ultimately successful or not. And all of this all put together really means that you're going to have a higher likelihood of successful adoption because you've brought people in from the outset. You let people that are going to be your most active users feel like they have ownership and a stake in the process. And you have a way of measuring the success of the tool ultimately. Because what often happens, and I see this all the time, particularly with actually large organizations, is a large organization will, some function of that large organization that doesn't talk with a lot of other functions incorporates a tool, and then as it turns out, they're the only ones that use it, but they're expecting other people to use it because it's supposed to be used by other people. And what that tells me is that they didn't necessarily bring these other functions in to the evaluation process, and that function just assumed that these other parts of the organization were going to be using the tool. And that's problematic because last thing you want to be doing, especially when it comes to adoption of a tech tool, and especially if it's adoption of an AI tech tool, is have it just sitting on a proverbial shelf collecting dust, because that does a couple of things that are equally bad. One is it hurts future adoption of tech because people see this something that was expensive, it's just a boondoggle, no one's paying, no one's using it. And so why can we trust you again for another tool? And two, it makes people even more skeptical of tech and of AI because they see, oh, well, this tool isn't being used or isn't doing what we thought it was going to do. So why should we trust any future tools that will be doing this or something else going forward? And that also goes back to something I said at the outset in terms of expectations around AI, and that we have to understand that AI, we're just at the beginning of this AI journey. And so AI is where the internet was, maybe 15, 20 years ago. So we have a long ways to go. And it's exciting, but it's also, there's some improvements that are going to be happening. And we have to be mindful of those improvements and mindful of the fact that this is not a perfect solution. And it's not going to solve any and all problems. Just like any tech, it's not going to solve any and every problem. So here's some questions that I would suggest asking the vendor, and these are based off of my own experience. What data sets has your AI been trained on? Are they within our key practice areas? How does the system handle novel or complex legal questions? How does it handle inputs at all? Do you have to be careful what you say? Any tips or suggestions? What's the learning curve associated? How can we be sure that your AI is going to be biased? You're going to provide information that's perhaps inaccurate or that perhaps is misleading. Data security is a huge one, given what I said about the AI Act, the Data Act, and data privacy laws that currently exist. Where is data stored? Who has access to it? What types of encryption exist? What types of security protocols exist? Are you SOC 2 Type 2 certified? For those who don't know, SOC 2 Type 2 is a pretty rigorous data security certification process. My company is SOC 2 certified. A lot of vendors either are certified or are in the process of getting certified. And that provides an added level of protection, as well as reassurance that they've been that their data security practices are aligned to sort of various relevant security frameworks. Liability. Who's liable for errors in AI generated content? Is it them? Is it you? Is it both? How is that structured? What type of indemnification exists for system failures or for failures with respect to AI generated work? Is it you? Is it us? How does that work? Does the vendor store your data? Does it use your data to train itself? Most people don't want that to happen. a reliable, trustworthy vendor will likely tell you that they will not be using your data to train their AI, but that's a question you want to be asking. Lastly, around support and updates. What training is provided? How often are updates released? What happens if you get an update, but as we've seen sometimes that can happen, what happens if we get an update, but it actually causes an unexpected issue? What's our recourse? What's the level of support we get? What customizations exist for this tool for our particular organization? How easily are those customizations made? Because lawyers being lawyers, we all like things done our way, how we want. We tend to be control freaks. We really want control over every part of the process. So how does that work? These kinds of questions are really vital to ask during the evaluation process. And any vendor worth their salt will be able to provide you with answers to all of these questions through documentation and through answers that they provide to you. So these are really important things you want to be asking and be verifying. Because again, you don't just want to rely on the word of a vendor, in a demo, nor do you want to just rely on just some vague assurance. You really want specificity. So that's why it's important to ask these questions, get them answered, and have them documented. Usually all these things are documented in a variety of different ways, through reports, through audits, and a variety of other ways. And so this is something super important. And these are not all the questions you should be asking, but these are just some of the questions that you should be asking, and sort of the types of questions that you should be asking. So let's talk a little bit more about the broader kind of responsible AI planning task. So really, it starts with understanding kind of why you want to use AI, what the purpose is, how it's intended to help you and or your team. And that requires sort of understanding kind of who's going to be involved in it, what their degree of involvement is going to be, what their roles and responsibilities are going to be. For a large organization, it makes sense to have an internal AI review committee, have representatives from legal, IT, legal operations, procurement, and establish an AI use policy or policies that are aligned to your organization's risk profile, your organization's regulatory environment. Those companies that are in more heavily regulated industries may want to have a more stringent set of policies in place. And you also want to invest in your people. You want to invest in their developments. You want to give them time to learn how to use AI tools, including, but not limited to those that you have in place in your organization. Because the best way to learn about AI and AI solutions, and I can tell, I can talk anyone's ear off about AI until the cows come home, but really the best way to learn about these tools is to use them yourself and experiment with asking these tools to do different things, what types of responses you get, and how to get the best responses. And regularly review your tools and how effective they've been. Let me just talk a little bit about using AI in general, which goes to kind of being, building a responsible AI plan. When you are interacting with AI, you likely have seen the term prompt engineering, which is a ridiculously overcomplicated term that refers to something very simple, which is, what are you asking the AI to do? That's really what prompt engineering is. I don't know who came up with the term prompt engineering, but I need to have a stern word with them to tell them that it's literally the worst phrase you could ever come up with for this very simple task. The complication with prompting, basically asking AI to do what you want to do, is that a lot of people assume that AI is going to think the way a human thinks, meaning that it will pick up on what you're asking to do and understand it perfectly, and therefore provide a perfect response. It is not at all. What it is doing is it literally is looking for patterns based off the letters and words in your query and matching it with its data, and then providing you with an output based off of what matches and what patterns it finds. And because of that, the more context and the more specificity you can give these AI tools, more likely it is you're going to get a better response. Meaning that you have to be, for lack of a better word, a little pedantic with these tools. In other words, be very specific, be very structured, act as if you are a teacher teaching someone how to do something. I.e., like you're interacting with a first year associate, i.e., someone who's capable of doing some things, but not everything, and not everything that you would think they were capable of perfectly. So you want to basically lay out what you want it to do step by step by step by step. And off of this means starting with one step, then going to the next step, then going to the next step. AI is getting better at doing multiple things at the same time. But if you can do it over a series of prompts as opposed to one big prompt, you're more likely going to get a better result, regardless of what solution you use. So that really is what prompt engineering is talking about. And you may have seen articles about the need for prompt engineers or for prompt engineering classes. Prompt engineering as a job is not going to exist for very long because AI is just going to get better at being able to provide better outputs based off of your inputs. However, what is not going to go away is the need for you to be better and better at providing inputs. What that means is you need to start experimenting now with AI to understand how to interact with it, because basic interaction between you and AI is not going to change too much over the next few years. We all are hoping for perhaps a computer that can just talk to and automatically can do everything for us. That's going to take a lot of time, and that is less to do with more of the tasks at hand and more to do with just the complications of language. I'm not going to go too much into that, but I'm going to say that that's a big task. I can equate it to why autocorrect is so annoying. You would think autocorrect would be better at this point, and it's still not. The reason for that is because language is very complicated, basically. So, how do you build a future-ready law practice? Well, that's a very broad question, and I have some basics sort of ideas around this in the context of AI. Number one, AI is a partner. It is your collaborator. It is here to augment what you do. It is not to substitute what you do. You can free up time, but it is not going to replace everything you do. It cannot necessarily fully understand context. It cannot fully understand emotion, although it is getting better at that. And by understanding emotion, I mean having emotional intelligence. It is getting better, but it's not perfect. So really, you want to be collaborating with AI, because a lot of people view AI as sort of this through the lens of an us versus them type of thing. And that's really not the way to view it. It's not here to outcompete you or outdo you. It's here to help you be a better version of you, be a better professional, be more productive, be more successful. So view it as a partner. View it as an imperfect partner, something that's here to help you, but it's not going to always get everything right. With regards to implementation, make sure that you stay on top of it. Make sure that you're constantly reviewing how the AI tools you have are being used, who's using them, what data is being shared with them, how the data is being shared that the AI is providing with you. In terms of, strategy, law firms, for the most part at this point, a lot of them are either using AI already, and if they're not, they certainly have lawyers that likely are using AI. Whether the firm is aware of that or not is another question. Some have developed their own internal AI solutions out of concerns around security and confidentiality, which is not necessarily a bad idea, but not all firms can do that because it's expensive and time-consuming and resource-intensive. But the bottom line is AI is here to stay. And so the firms and legal departments that are ultimately going to be most successful will be those that integrate AI and are open to, and I'm going to use a word that lawyers don't necessarily like to hear, but I'm going to use the word anyway, experimentation. Are experimenting with AI, learning from their experimentation, learning how to use it, and learning what to do and what not to do. And the best way to do that is through a controlled environment, like a proof of concept or a sandbox. But the bottom line is AI is not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's only going to get better going forward. So to be successful for the long term, you have to meet the reality that exists. You can't fight reality. And so the reality is AI is here. So we have to be using it. That doesn't mean you have to be some kind of techie or a coder. I'm not a coder. I'm not a big programmer. I dabble in programming, but really just for fun. AI is not something that you should fear or something that you feel like can only be used by the most tech savvy people. That's not the purpose of AI. AI is here to help you be better at what you do through allowing you to do things that you are better at and AI to do things that AI is better at. And that will continue to shift as AI gets better. So that's kind of where we are at this point. I realize there's a little bit of time left. I want to leave room for some questions because that was a lot of information. I also did mention that I will be sharing a little bit of kind of an action plan for how to leverage generative AI as well that I will share with everyone that's part of the webinar, whether you are here listening live or whether you're listening to this as a recording. And I just want to thank you all for being here. Let me, before we get to questions, let me just leave you all with one thing, which is that I used to not be someone who was so into technology. In fact, I hated technology. I feared it. I feared it as intrusive. I feared it as clunky, as annoying, as God, I have to be a programmer to use this. I'm dating a little bit myself here, but there was time prior to computers when I existed and was somewhat self-aware. And when computers came on the scene, that was a little bit of a scary point. So that is something that I think is definitely can be frightening. But the bottom line is AI is here. And the best way to overcome your fear and the way I overcome my fear of technology was to expose myself to it. Expose myself to it, experiment with it, use it. That's how a lot of people overcome any fear they have is through what's called exposure therapy. It's a little bit of a scary thing, but it's basically throwing yourself into the deep end, and that can be very, very helpful for overcoming your fear.
Colin, question about using AI with your current, Natalia's mentioning Centerbase, but any practice management software that you use to run your firm, how do you complement it with existing AI tools?
Yeah, so with respect to practice management, so there's a variety of different ways that AI can be used. Can be used to ensure that bills are automatically sent out to clients appropriately on a timely basis, and that the bills are going to the right people for the right amount of time and effort. Allows you to, as I said before, improve client intake, ensuring that the clients you have, that all their information gets documented appropriately, gets sent to the right places, the forms get set up appropriately, including kind of billing addresses and things like that. Also can help you ensure that, for example, you have the right people working on the right tasks and you keep track of who's doing what and send out automated reminders and allow them to better track their time and better track their statuses. So there's a variety of different ways in which AI can be very helpful that isn't necessarily the most glamorous of ways in which to work, but takes sort of the administrative burden away from you and allow you to spend your time more productively on things that are more strategic and more require a little more human judgment, which is I think very powerful.
And along those lines, Colin, how can you give us an example of you talk to hundreds of firms and work with hundreds of firms, example of firms that are doing AI really well and how it's working for them and kind of what did they do?
Yeah, so I think that a number of firms are using a tool called Harvey. Harvey is a legal research tool. Harvey is in some ways marketed exclusively for law firms. Just want to throw that out there. In terms of successful firms that have been successful using AI, I'd say that there have been a variety of firms. For example, on the smaller end, I have a couple of friends who operate a law firm, and they're using AI to basically assist because they're a small firm. They're using AI to assist with client intake as well as with managing. Actually, they're doing a little bit of litigation, so managing with e-discovery, and that can make that burdensome task way more easier because it can analyze a large amount of documents. Actually, this question from George is actually the perfect example because this law firm basically is doing similar work to what George is speaking about. His question had to do with a firm that does a lot of criminal defense family law. That's what my friend's firm does. And they need to analyze large documents like medical records or criminal discovery. My friend's firm doesn't do medical documents, but does do criminal discovery. And so the beauty is they're using AI to do it, but they're using it using a tool. I forget the exact AI tool that they use, but it's internal for their use only, meaning that it's only looking at their documents, and their documents are not being used to train the AI at all. So it addresses that issue of confidentiality. Um, Generally speaking, types of tools, most e-discovery tools, like Disco or Reveal or Relativity will address this and will not be using your data to train their tools on. And if you have a question about that, most reputable vendors will be upfront about that, and you can ask to be sure. But you don't have to only use your own cloned or closed system. In other words, you don't have to build your own to be successful. So George, I think your question is a pertinent one, a timely one, and thankfully you're not the only person who is thinking about this or worried about this. And quite frankly, a lot of these tools that do this type of e-discovery work would not be successful if they couldn't do it while respecting client confidentiality, because they just wouldn't be successful. No one would use them. Let's see. Another question from Carrie. My firm wants feedback about available AIs that look at our documents and generate new documents based on the info in our docs. So, bit of a broad question. There are tools that exist. Various ones that could be helpful could be something like Clear Brief. I'll put that in the chat. That's one. If you need other types of review tools, um, VLEX, Vincent from VLEX could also perhaps be helpful. Those are two that I would suggest. Another site that I would suggest looking at with respect to different types of tools in their relative applicability to your need, go to Legal Tech Hub. So that would be helpful. And David, likewise, I would suggest going to the Legal Tech Hub that you can look at with respect to AI and if it can be measured. You also really, I think it's important for different firms and departments to develop KPIs that are relevant for their particular needs. One set of KPIs won't be the same for another, for one department, won't be the same for a different department. So you want to really be sure that those are aligned to your needs. But these are actually really excellent questions, and personally, I'm glad that folks are asking these kinds of questions because these are the questions that are important, that should be asked, because again, your best approach with AI is trust, but verify, like any lawyer should. Be skeptical, but also be open, and be willing to learn and to grow, because that's the only way you're going to be ultimately successful with these tools. Because most of what I've said here likely will be timeless, but things are also likely going to change quickly over the next few years. So we have to be ready for that as well. Dan or Diane, I don't want to mispronounce your name. I'm sorry if I already did. I think we should ask AI what will be best for our people department workflows. So yes, that is not necessarily a bad suggestion. However, you want to make sure that you're giving the whatever AI you're asking this question to as specific information as possible so that it can give you the right suggestions. And also make sure to test out those suggestions yourself and don't just take the suggestions at face value, because anything AI tells you shouldn't just assume to be true at face value necessarily. But that is a good question. Actually, quite frankly, one thing I do with AI is I ask it, okay, I want to ask you this question. What would be a better way of asking this question to get a better output from you? Not well, from you, I mean from the solution. And it actually is very good at providing feedback on that front. So in some ways, with respect to what I was talking about earlier with prompt engineering, you can actually use some of these AI tools to help you become better at asking it better questions. So George has a question. Well, first I saw someone mention Good Fact. I actually had not heard of him, but that is a good suggestion with respect to medical record reviews. I actually want to check them out as well. And then George asked a question about, are there still client confidentiality concerns if you were to change certain names in the document and other identifying info, then have something like ChatGPT look at it? So my suggestion would be have Claude look at it, not ChatGPT currently due to that lawsuit I mentioned earlier. But generally speaking, if you remove client info from a document, which could be not that hard to do, in some ways could be hard to do depending on the complexity, it's not a bad way of resolving that client confidentiality issue. But again, you want to be really sure you remove all that client confidentiality, client information, names, addresses, potentially numbers, and things like that that could be used to potentially identify an entity named in that document. But thanks for the question. That's a good one. And thank you all for being here, by the way. I really enjoyed this presentation. I wanted to leave plenty of room for questions because I didn't want to just talk everyone's ear off for an hour.
Colin, you want me to put your LinkedIn on the chat?
Yes,
People
please
want
feel free
to
to do so.
connect with you.
Absolutely. I'm very active on LinkedIn, as some folks may know already. David, thanks for those suggestions. Even Up is a good one. Foundation, it's a good one. Eve also. So appreciate those suggestions. My little guy that I will provide will also provide some suggestions as well. So thank you all. And if anyone has any last minute questions, I got 5 minutes left and happy to answer any other questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks everybody who attended, and we'll be sending out the recording of this and the slides as well. Appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated everyone being here. And my thanks to Centerbase for hosting this and giving me the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day. Bye.
Bye.